So thank you for the introduction of the Doublespend proofs. Initially, I was going to have a talk a little bit about the use cases of doublespends. It's interesting to see that in the last month or so, a lot of people have already embraced the concept. Even last weekend, I think it was, that Andrew Stone put up a blog, which essentially is the topic of my original talk. I'm very happy that you know, I don't have to repeat that. So I kind of pivoted to a different, more high-level talk. I'm sorry if people have been looking forward to the actual content before. The zero-com setup is about unconfirmed transactions held in a memory pool, and the presence being that in memory pool is good enough proof that they are going to be mined. The problem I hit was that last one, oh, I'm sorry. I'm just reading my comments, sorry. So I'm going back to a bit of a high-level thing, and I'm seeing, you know, is the trust we have in a Bitcoin node or a player in the ecosystem. How can we look at that? And if I read this statement, which is a Bitcoin node is a technological innovation that creates an oasis of trust in the chaos of the internet. This is how many look at Bitcoin, and to an extent, this is correct. But at the same time, a 3 confirmation transaction is more trustworthy than a 1 confirmation. And Alice gave a good example. KYC person doing a payment to you is also more trustworthy. And, you know, a low payment is more trustworthy than a high payment. So it's not entirely true. The point, of course, being that trust is not a binary choice. This is a quote from 2013, I think. The human assessment stays relevant. Trust as seen by the software is exclusively local, which means that we have a node that says this transaction is the correct one, but it doesn't know what the rest of the world thinks. And a doublespend is a very good example where different players in the network disagree about this concept. And that is exactly why we have this problem. And if you take the high-level view, what you see is that the design of Bitcoin being decentralized means that you have all these little players, but they're not really communicating with each other. I want to propose that we look at the distributed Bitcoin network as a biological organism where each node is like a cell that is complex but mostly self-sufficient. And like in any such biological organism, we can see attackers trying to do harm. What we see is that protocol designers, they try to come up with all ways they can imagine such attacks to happen, and they write a fix. The problem, of course, is that attackers, they have a much faster turnaround time. You can try different attack twice a day, and protocol designers have months or years to upgrade the network. On top of that, the permissionless innovation means that more issues can be introduced by anybody. Just a new layer being added, a new client being rolled out. And you very quickly see that you end up just full time putting out fires on how do you avoid this if you try to solve this at the protocol level. And you end up with a system, and you end up with a system, I have to scroll here, that is just full of little bug fixes. So can we find some common ground? Is it possible to say, hey, we have different nodes coming together, but you need to actually think about communicating not just positive things like correct messages, but also communicating, hey, something is harming the network, which is essentially what a double-spend proof is, communicating somebody is harming the network. And that means that if you have one node, probably a minor node, saying, hey, I see 2 transactions, they can tell the merchant, which is economically not the same thing. And the merchant can basically protect itself by calling the police. And that means that you can see the whole thing again with a high-level view as a whole ecosystem that is using different parts of the ecosystem to protect other parts. I think that communicating the proof that a user is misbehaving needs to be outside of the rules of that the user is actively trying to abuse. So if you look at the idea of double-spend proofs, they are unique and they are, in my opinion, better than relaying the second transaction because they fall outside of the system that transactions relaying is. So to clarify that, if you see transaction being relayed between nodes as something we innovate in, we change the rules a little bit. For instance, we prefer transactions to be mined that spend more inputs than they create. That's something we're probably going to see happen. We have a lot of different things that we're going to probably change about how we approve and disapprove of different transactions. And the way that that grows is probably going to give us some attack factors that smart people will find and abuse. So we want to send those proofs completely outside of the actual transaction system. And so what I think is that we can improve on the Bitcoin system with just the first step, Bitcoin double-spend proofs. But a second step would be that we create proofs of the same concept, where users trying to abuse the system. And users can be anybody, not just a customer. It can also be a miner, as we saw a hint of this in Peter's presentation. There might be a miner out there that is trying to mine replace by fee transactions. It would be fantastic to see if we can communicate that attack on the system and let the ecosystem take action. For instance, miners, and this is humans, not software. Miners can decide to orphan his blocks or at least talk to him, you know what I mean? There are lots of different ways. And I invite this room full of developers to think about proofs as a way to step outside of the normal positive creation of trust, where bad behavior can be avoided by just creating accountability on a network-wide basis. And that's all I have to say.